how we've been able to build this revenue generating machine that we have today. It's really that enterprise focus that's taken us there. That's built on really two core revenue stream kind of generating businesses. One is obviously AI, where we provide these enterprise grade training and inferencing resources. We have a distributed GPU cloud for gaming, which allows us to deliver cloud gaming from a PC and a mobile perspective. It allows us to do real-time rendering and cloud publishing.
DePIN and the acronym, it's become such a term du jour lately, which I love because I've been in this space since like 2020 when it was just like Helium and Filecoin and a couple of projects. I've seen like you and Aethir on Twitter seem to be pretty all in on the acronym, describing yourselves as one. But I'm curious, like when you first heard of the subsector, what your impressions were and kind of what you think now.
Dude, I was actually really happy when I heard it, right? Because it gave a name to something that I was already trying to label within our own organization, right? You and I both know that DePIN is not a new phenomenon, right? Like you mentioned just before, there's been Helium, there's been Filecoin, right? There's Render, right? But even before that, we had Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's a DePIN, right? It literally the premise of our entire industry is DePIN, right? Decentralized contributors uniting under some form of network mandate and being rewarded for doing recognized work, right? It's like core, right? All that DePIN is that kind of physical layer within the real world that kind of makes the kind of the network feel more tangible sometimes. I think that's a little bit about why people like DePIN. It feels real, right? Now, when we were building out Aethir, we were building out decentralized cloud infrastructure, right? And we called it DCI. That was our acronym that we were going all in on, right? Decentralized cloud infrastructure. And it was trying to get people to understand that it's cloud infrastructure like an AWS or Google Cloud, right? But it's decentralized, right? That we don't own all of the equipment that's contributing to that cloud, like Amazon does, or like, again, Google Cloud does. But it's also a little bit of a difficult acronym to explain to people when you're explaining in isolation, right? Because maybe people don't understand how cloud infrastructure should normally look, right? Or maybe they don't understand how to conceptualize what Aethir in particular is building. But DePIN was a really cool moment because it gave people a category of products that they could understand. And it meant that even if you don't fully understand what Aethir does, you can still get it because you'll understand what Filecoin does or what Render does or what Helium does. And you could say, oh, they're doing like Filecoin things with GPUs, or they're doing Helium things with GPUs. And it built a little bridge, I think, for explaining to people like what we do. So I loved it. I think it was Masari that coined it very initially. So yeah, I tweeted it like the same day. I was like, this is what I need.
Let's go. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that having a singular term and having kind of a general idea as a crypto person of the DePIN model is basically there's token incentives, there's hardware distributed usually around the world, there's some service being provided. It does help you conceptualize a new DePIN faster. It definitely does for me, right? Like if someone describes themselves as a DePIN, I'm like, okay, those three things are probably present. Of course, like what's interesting about it is you can have a DePIN in kind of any real world vertical, which is something I've been pounding the table about for a while. Is like the TAM is so large when you can take in the entire energy market, the entire telecom market, compute. Like these are huge, some of the biggest industries in the world in a Web 2 sense, and they can be innovated within like a DePIN model. So I think it's super helpful for crypto people to quickly get up to speed on what a new DePIN is. In terms of non-crypto people, how would you describe what Aethir is doing to them and like why they should care?
Why you should care about Aethir? Well, we solve a pretty critical problem out there, right? So if you know about AI, right? And you know the kind of the basics that are needed for AI to function. You may probably know that AI needs GPUs, right? Maybe you've seen Nvidia pumping to be, the biggest company in the world. Maybe you've heard about the fact that there's this compute scarcity and people are building these massive data centers and infrastructure deployments, right? All because they want to train these models and get smarter AI, right? It's a pretty, I think, global, macro, recognizable piece of this kind of somewhat recent evolution in the tech space, right? Well, access to that GPU resource is something that a large portion of tech companies still struggle with, right? There is this global compute scarcity. Elon Musk has said, some funny things around it. He's gone out and said, like, GPUs are harder to buy than drugs, right? It's a funny little environment because at the moment, the more of these GPUs you have and the more data you have, the faster you can train your models, the quicker you can get more competitive models, and it's super linear, right? It's literally like more data, more compute, smarter, more intelligent model, like in a reasonably short period of time. And big tech companies have pretty much an insatiable appetite for winning that race, and as a result, pretty much an insatiable appetite for compute. So they're just buying everything that's coming off these manufacturing runs from NVIDIA. And where does that put everyone else, right? Because not every builder in the AI space is a Microsoft or a Google or an OpenAI, right? Or an Anthropic. And that means that all of these kind of traditional channels that you would usually go to get access to these resources are now either kind of deficient, right? Because they don't have supply to offer up to kind of smaller guys, or they're just price gouging, right? They're saying this is a really valuable resource, so we're going to pump the price. And that's a real challenge for people that are out there looking to build, particularly if you're building outside of kind of big tech. So what we do is we've created this really simple infrastructure layer that allows anyone, but we focus almost exclusively, we do focus exclusively on enterprise at the moment, but it allows anyone, think enterprises, to reconnect idle compute. So if you've gone out as a big telco or a big tech company and you've bought a bunch of this equipment, and maybe your production's delayed, or maybe you overestimated how much you need, right? Well, now you can just connect that to Aethir's network and rent it back to the demand ecosystem, right? It's in its simplest form, it's like Airbnb, right? You've got all of these idle enterprise GPUs that are effectively lost, right? Because before Airbnb, your spare room had no value to the broader, travel ecosystem, right? Once Airbnb created the infrastructure, they created a new market for this supply that they were reactivating and redistributing. And that's what we're doing. So we're kind of reactivating this latent supply that's kind of been lost by companies that don't natively have the infrastructure to resell stuff they've already purchased, and giving them this great way to offset that cost, that really high cost of the most expensive compute ever, right? And then allow us to connect them with kind of demand all over the world in a really, really cool way. And it gives us the ability to add new supply back into the market that isn't there otherwise, and do it in a way that is a lot cheaper than you'll see in kind of the traditional hyperscaler cloud environments.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I think tapping into latent supply of any resource is pretty powerful, because adding more supply to a market is one of the easiest, quickest ways to drive down price. And so if you guys can do that, it's kind of a win-win, I think, for every player, right? Like, people that have huge data centers and tons of compute are happy to make more money on existing assets. And then end consumers of that compute are happy to pay less for the same kind of enterprise grade GPUs. So I think it's definitely a win-win. You're mostly tapping into latent supply. I also saw there were AethirEdge devices. So those are kind of like for purchase. Are they for sale yet? And
They
how
are.
do you foresee the split between like we want people to buy hardware versus we want to just tap into latent hardware already out there?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing to understand with our network is that different pieces of the network or different types of equipment do different jobs, right? So even just within AI, and Aether does AI and gaming, right? But even just within AI, there's different types of GPUs for different jobs. Like if you're training a large language model, if you're going from ChatGPT 4 to ChatGPT 5, you'll want a whole bunch of the most expensive GPUs, right? H100s. And they're incredibly expensive, super high powerful. They're like the Ferraris of GPUs, right? But if you're doing something, for example, like providing a small language model based application, right? Where you want that application to be able to interact with a user seamlessly with no latency and no lag and none of this kind of delay that ruins the immersiveness of your experience, then you don't want this kind of elephant of a GPU that's sitting in a data center, hundreds of miles away. What you want is a small, efficient compute device that's really close to users. So if you want to kind of capture the entirety of the spectrum and make sure all the different participants and use cases for actors within that network are kind of looked after, then you need this diversity of compute, right? And I would probably make the case that the trickiest kind of type of compute to onboard into your network is what you'd call the edge, right? Edge computing, the compute that happens pretty much as close to the user as possible. And the reason is because how do you do it, right? Like I'm not going to go and park a big GPU in the basement of your building, right? Because how am I going to justify monetizing it? The power draw, the bandwidth draw, the infrastructure, right? There's no immediate use case outside of very kind of specific tech examples where it makes sense for someone to go and actually deploy that type of infrastructure in an edge environment, right? And then, maybe you say, okay, well, what about all the compute that already exists, right? Like your PS5 or your computer. How about we optimize that? Well, the difficulty there is everyone has different specs, right? Everyone's got different drivers, different hardware, different OSs. There's like this almost infinite variety of variance, right, across all the different types of compute that exist in people's homes. And it's really hard to optimize for all of them and create this like uniformity that you can sell and use. So we asked ourselves, right, how would we look at the edge? And we thought, what could we do to reduce variability in the edge? And the answer is DePIN, right? You take a device that people can purchase, you sell it to them, right? So you don't have kind of bad actors. You reward them for holding it, right? And then you make sure that device is useful. So effectively, we have the AethirEdge, which is a consumer mining device. We partnered with Qualcomm. Oh man, my AethirEdge is in the other room. Otherwise, I would have held it up and showed you. But it operates as an enterprise grade edge capable node within our network. So any latency sensitive applications, any processing that benefits from being adjacent to users, any kind of small language models that want to really optimize for low latency, right? That's exactly where you want to live. You want to be doing your processing on an AethirEdge device because you have instantaneous access to that edge compute layer.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. You want to tap into the enterprise grade supply that's already out there, but also be able to have a standardized, trusted device that you guys have worked to manufacture or worked with partners to manufacture that you can get out there. I want to talk about the node sale. I know it's probably the hot topic everyone wants to ask you about, but I think it blew the crypto space away. Like 75,000 checker node licenses were sold for around 100 million in ETH, which is just an insane number. So talk to me just about, how that process was. Was it surprising to you that many people wanted checker nodes? Do they just run on your laptop? How easy it is to kind of set up, and maybe what they do for the network?
Yeah, it was crazy. I think we ended up just under about 130 mil in sales from that node sale, and that's at, I wouldn't say current ETH price. That's like maybe like three point something, right? But I think we all know that ETH is pretty underpriced at the moment. So it was a pretty ridiculous outcome that honestly highlighted the conviction that our community has in what we're building, right? So massive shout out to our community for the support they gave us. But yeah, to be honest, the node sale went a lot better than we were expecting, right? But it was something that we kind of really did need to do, right? I think what people really appreciated about our node sale, and I think they appreciate this about projects that do good node sales, right? That the node has utility, right? It has a purpose. It needs to be there. You're not just doing a node sale so you can milk your community, right? You're doing it because your network needs it, right? And it's valuable, right? It's useful not just to be a member of that community, but the work that you're doing is valuable as well. So yeah, we launched our node sale. We did our best to explain to our community what the node sale was. You probably know a little about this already, but we did what's called checker nodes. We called them checker nodes. They were effectively the policemen of our network, right? Whenever you're building a DePIN, whenever you're building a decentralized network, the biggest challenge you face is, well, you don't really own anything else in the network other than what you contribute, right? So what you contribute. You can validate and say, oh, yes, I did contribute a 4090, right? And you know that for sure. But I don't know for sure that this person over there that said they contributed a 4090 actually contributed a 4090 GPU, right? How do you confirm it? So you need to have a role within your network that is there to provide that trust and ensure that bad actors are removed, because nothing's going to like FUD your network more than someone coming in and purchasing a service from you and then realizing they purchased it from someone who's not actually providing the service that they wanted to buy. So we chose to solve that by providing licenses to do work as the police within our network, effectively separating police and state, right? We said, we're going to give the full role of checking our network to our community. We're going to pay you to do it because we think it's one of the most important things that our community can do within our network. And you're going to be out there ensuring that people are who they say they are, they're doing the work that they say they're doing, and that they're rewarded according to the work that they did, right? And this was I think a really well received and really powerful kind of position to give our community that they really responded to. And one other thing that I'll say is, like I mentioned in the beginning, we're 100% enterprise grade, which means if you want to contribute a GPU to our network, you're probably a tech company. Yeah, it's extremely unlikely that the average Joe would own a GPU that's sitting in a data center, right? H100s at, $300K a pop, right? It's just probably unlikely, which meant the barrier to participate in our DePIN was really high, which I think kind of sucked, right? Because the great thing about DePIN is it's participatory. Anyone should be able to come in and contribute as long as they can provide value. So we'd realized that we had this kind of disconnect where we wanted our community to be able to participate in our network, but we'd set such a high bar that it was really difficult for them to do so. So by unlocking this role for them as checkers within the network, we gave them access to participate. And that was really cool.
I think it makes sense on the kind of just like how expensive the hardware can be. Like you want to have as large of a community as possible. And I think involving them kind of with the checker nodes is a really good idea. Talking about revenue, you guys have a ton of revenue. So I think Cointelegraph reported you had 36 million of revenue over the last year. It's growing 10% month over month. That's definitely one of the highest, revenue numbers I think anyone's seen in DePIN. If you could talk a bit about maybe like who are those customers, or if not names, like customer profiles, typical customer profiles, and then also how that kind of top line revenue accrues to the token.
Yeah, actually, the last question that you asked is a great one, because we actually did a big PR release today about our collaboration with Oros on how we convert all of our Web2 revenues into the token. I'll talk a little bit more about it. I'll start with your sort of original question. But yeah, right now we're sitting at around 36 million in annual recurring revenue. We're growing that revenue at a very kind of steady rate. And yeah, we're pretty proud of kind of what we've been able to achieve with the infrastructure that we have. I think the big, I guess, differentiator, or the thing that kind of put us in the position where we've been able to kind of generate the revenues that we're kind of sharing with the world now, was the decision that we made very early on to be enterprise focused, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of DePINs make the early move to aggregate consumer equipment. In the compute space, maybe that's consumer GPUs. It's a great way to build a community, right? Because obviously a huge number of people have GPUs, particularly in the crypto space. They've got an idle gaming PC, they've got a laptop. And if you tell them, hey, download this piece of software, link your GPU up to our network, and you'll earn tokens while you sleep, it's like a no-brainer, right? The community loves it. So all of a sudden you can onboard 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 GPUs within your network. And you can take that to VCs and you can say, hey, look at what I've built. I've got this big network, let's raise some capital, right? So there's a huge amount of allure to that business model, right? The challenge is that you get to a point pretty quickly where it's really difficult to sell that compute, right? Because who's the customer? When you've got a whole bunch of gaming PCs, right? Who's the customer of that compute power? Because the challenge here is the customers are generally going to be businesses, right? And businesses care about performance, quality, uptime, right? And how can you guarantee to them that this gaming PC in your network's not going to be switched off at night, right? Or this GPU won't have its bandwidth throttled because they love watching Netflix of an evening, right? It's really hard to kind of tick the boxes that corporates need when you're selling them something, which is particularly a service, right? When you're aggregating consumer equipment. And in the early days, we kind of had that choice. We're like, do we go this consumer equipment route, or do we go this enterprise route? And the enterprise route was a lot harder, right? It took us a lot longer to get to a point where we could start to raise money. Traction was a lot more difficult to achieve. It's kind of like the difference between a B2C and a B2B sales cycle, right? Much harder to sell to big companies. But once you get that flywheel of enterprise sales happening, it spins at a scale that is just really difficult to achieve with kind of the smaller customers in that B2C space. And that's the analogy that I like to use for how we've been able to build this revenue generating machine that we have today. It's really that enterprise focus that's taken us there. And that's built on really two core revenue stream kind of generating businesses. One is obviously AI, where we provide these enterprise grade training and inferencing resources. Training, I would say, is driving more revenue than inferencing at the moment. But as the AI sector matures, we're going to see more applications and more engagement with kind of products outside of just, ChatGPT and Anthropic cloud, stuff like that. So I expect that to kind of pick up. But a lot of big training runs happening on our 3,000 or 4,000 H100s at the moment. Really cool partnership with Tensor Opera, which are the new, that's the rebrand of FedML, which is kind of like a Hugging Face competitor. They're training their own in-house model on the back of Aethir infrastructure. That's cool. We've got really cool startups using Aethir infrastructure like iAgent and Momate. So a lot of action there, which is awesome. And then we also have a gaming infrastructure, which I haven't really talked about, but we have a distributed GPU cloud for gaming, which allows us to deliver kind of cloud gaming from a PC and a mobile perspective. It allows us to do real-time rendering and cloud publishing. So a lot of cool stuff on the gaming side, and we have some pretty massive gaming customers there that are serving tens, if not hundreds of thousands of users on the back of that infrastructure.
100%. Yeah, no, it's awesome to hear it kind of segmented out like that. Where would you like to point our listeners to in terms of keeping up with you, keeping up with Aethir?
Yeah, I think the focus of the podcast is DePIN. So I want to point people to the AethirEdge, right? I think the AethirEdge is probably the coolest consumer device for DePIN enthusiasts out there on the market, right? You can purchase this device. It sits in your home. It plugs in. It connects to your Wi-Fi, and it operates as an AI-capable enterprise node. And it's passive, totally passive. You just connect to an app on your phone. You don't need to do anything. All that happens is that device now becomes available for work. And what's cool about it, or maybe not what's cool, but what I think is important to know is it's not an Amazon Alexa or something. There's no microphone. It's not sitting there absorbing data, right? It's literally a black box with zero external sensors, right? All it is a compute chip that wants to do AI workloads or rendering workloads. And when it does, you guys get rewarded. So the rewards for these devices are I think attractive and very commensurate with like the value of the ecosystem. So thoroughly recommend people check those out. They are, they're very hot property at the moment. You can check it out at the website is myedge.io.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. Definitely a DePIN hardware enthusiast myself, so always like buying hardware from new projects just to even check it out, right? You can buy one, just see how profitable it is, see how hard it or easy it is to set up. Yeah. Okay. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great.
No worries, Connor. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for listening to the Proof of Coverage podcast. We post new episodes Mondays and Wednesdays, interviewing the best DePIN and crypto founders out there. If you like this episode, follow us on Twitter at CoverageProved and all other platforms, including YouTube and Spotify at Proof of Coverage Podcast. Thank you.